Every 2 years, Mizuno update their wedges, and this year the T24s have launched. So a progression on the T20, T22 that we've had before, with a few little alterations in terms of head shaping, as well as the sole shapes and profiles as well. So as per all the previous models, they are grain flow forged in Hiroshima, Japan. So what that means is, the forging takes place with a long rounded steel bar that gets cut into a particular weight and size and is then heated up to 1200 degrees centigrade and then pressed into shape. That's the forging process. Now, Mizuno, all the forging companies will do it very, very slightly differently, very slight nuances on temperature and speed and weight of press. But the grain flow forged element, and what that really means is every solid structure, every molecular structure has a direction of material, direction of sort of atomic materials. So when you go right down to the very, very small particles, they flow in a particular direction. If you go across this, then you're actually breaking them, and therefore you can create a slightly more brittle structure. But by forging and pressing and using that structure and using the direction of flow through the head, along the line of the forge, along the line of the head, what you're creating is a tighter grain flow, a tighter structure. What that actually means is more durability, a little bit more versatility in how you can produce the product, but a bit more consistency of product as well. And that's something that Mizuno have done for a number of years now. So that's certainly one element they've kept. Part of it, there is a high density forging process as well, and that keeps some more density of mass centered behind the strike. So again, that stable, solid Mizuno feel that we've all come to know and love. And there's a little bit of boron mixed into that 1025E carbon steel, which then gives a bit more durability as well. So that's the base structure. That carries across all the MP series as well. So that continues to the T24 wedge. We then move on to the refining in the head shape, what they call a craftsman's profile. So what Mizuno have done, it's a very, very compact, neat shape. I'll show this to you there. It's a slightly tighter profile than previous models, so a little bit neater in shape. One of the things that they've done, if I show you the back, you can see where that top edge here is chamfered, is angled. And what that does, they've narrowed out the toe side and the heel side a little bit and very slightly thinned out the visual, hold it that way, the visual on that top line. So it looks a little bit cleaner and neater, a slightly tighter shape around the toe as well. So a very compact shape, which, that's the line Mizuno have decided to go down with this head. It's a very, very clean shape at address. But actually what they've done within that is, actually we'll come on to a little bit later on, was one of the other aspects they've done to help with some of the spin performance. They've slightly changed where the mass sits, but I'll come on to that very shortly. Then going to move into, there's a V-type sole. So there's a certain relief profile that they use. So I'm going to a previous head model for this. So if we take the T22 and then the T24, these are both the D grinds. We'll come on to that shortly. You see there's a very slight difference in the peak and the angling on the sole. So the T24 here, on that top edge, it angles a little bit more, has a little bit more of a peak up and then more of a relief off the back edge. And what that's designed for is turf interaction. So designed to make it a little bit more efficient through the turf, consistency of strike and contact, but it makes them play, the actual measured bounce plays a little bit higher. Then you've got that relief on the back edge, which then all the brands claim that reduces the effective bounce. So there's a little bit more bounce to use to make contact with the turf with, but then it clears out the way, which lets the wedge then travel through the turf and get underneath the ball. So the V-sole relief is something they've added in. We'll go into the different grinds as well now. So I'm going to show a bit of a comparison between the different grinds. So what we've got with this one's the S grind. So very much a very standard grind, very neutral, mid bounce, a little bit of back edge relief, but very much designed more for squarer shots, kind of neutral profile. So not a lot of back edge relief, as you can see there. Just a very kind of base, every single brand does one like this because it's the most versatile sole shape. So that's a pretty neutral one. We'll then move into the D grind. So the D grind this time around, as I've just said, it peaks up a little bit more on that back edge. So there's a little bit of a sort of upper mid bounce, but more back edge relief. And what you'll see when I turn it around, a little more relief onto the heel. So this one's designed really to be played through a little bit more sort of versatile shot types, opening it up a little bit more. There's a bit more peak bounce, that's a peak on the crown, a little bit more back edge relief. What we then do is move into the C grind. Now this is more of a, I say a little bit more of a peak on the sole again, so slightly more of an aggressive up and then back edge relief. So onto the heel side there, you can see quite a lot more back edge taken off. So this one's designed more for shorter game shots, so that the C grind is, I believe, is in the 58 and the 60 degree lofts only. That's 56 through 60. The D grind 54 through 58, and the S grind I think covers off the lower lofts in particular. We don't have it here. There is an X grind. So I'll show you last year's version, since we've got that here. The X grind on the T22 was a wider, shallower grind. So the base bounce numbers, this one was a 6 degree, very, very low. It's a low bounce wedge. Again, the T24 has a little bit more of a peak up and then a slightly more aggressive back edge grind across. So it's a little more of an up and down, still designed to be very, very tight lie, very versatile for opening the wedge head up, but a little bit more peaked up and over than this one, which is smoothed off. And they've also introduced the V grind, which has the most, it's the highest bounce, but the most aggressive then relief. So that peak on the sole, if I get you the C grind, if I look at toe end on, where that ridge is on the sole moves slightly further forward. So rather than being towards the back half of the head, it sits more in the center. So a bit more like a T grind on the Vokey, or even on the ping wedges as well. So a little more of aggressive up, off. So really, it really works well for being laid heavily open, but really designed ultimately, I think, for more of an elite player. It's not going to suit too many people because it really suits being kind of sat right open and played off very kind of tighter turf, or someone who's very shallow into the back of the ball. So they've added an extra grind or so into the wedge as well. So one of the elements that we spoke about earlier, as I've mentioned, so briefly touched on, was the spin graduated design, spin weighted design, sorry, that's the terminology. So what that means is, what you'll see if I hold that toe end on, is that the very top edge, or the bottom edge as you look at it, is actually slightly thicker than the middle. So it fattens out as we move from the center out, it gets wider. So what that's designed to do is to put weight higher up the face. So that raises the center of gravity up. That also then brings the launch angle down, but keeps spin a little bit higher. So essentially the lower, within reason on a wedge, obviously right off the front edge you're not going to get any spin, but the further below that center of mass that you strike it, what happens is the head gears that way and the spin goes up. So that's really, those shots you catch a half a groove low always really spin. They come out a little bit lower, but they chew, simply because of that gearing effect on the face. So by working weight up the back of the head and up towards the top of the blade, they're trying to create that kind of lower launch, higher spin, almost slightly thin strike, which gets the maximum amount of spin. And that's something that's tracked across all the different lofts. The other element to this is then the QUADCUT grooves. So with the QUADCUT grooves and the HydroFlow micro grooves, see if I got that, hopefully I got that one right. They've definitely worked on how the grooves are cut and how they're spaced on the head to optimize spin. So this is something where if I hold a 50 degree, let's see where this will work, a 50 and a 60 degree together, hopefully that's enough to see that the grouping of the grooves and the amount are slightly different. So on the lower lofts, there are 17 grooves on the face, whereas on the high, so 46 to 52 degrees, 17 grooves, and on the 54 and up, there are 15 grooves. So reasons for that is they've gone slightly thinner and deeper at the very top and the bottom of the lower loft in order to get maximum spin on fuller shots. So when you're putting more speed in, you actually want a deeper groove to get moisture away from the face to get maximum spin, because you get more going into the face. On a higher loft wedge, by going wider and actually slightly shallower, that helps to get grip on the shorter shots on lower speed. So by going a little bit wider and a little bit shallower at the very top and bottom, but also a slightly wider spacing between them than the lower lofts, that picks up a little bit more grip at lower speed. So again, this is something that all of the brands are doing. They've all sorts of different terminology and different ways of communicating it. But that's something that we've seen for a number of years across all the different head manufacturers, in that they're optimizing the groove patterns for the pace of shot that's hit. The other bit with the HydroFlow micro grooves, that's designed to get wick moisture away from the face and away from the contact. So the more moisture you can get away from the contact, and therefore optimizing wet weather performance, the more spin you get. So on the lower loft heads, the milling pattern is a little bit more vertical, where it's a square or fuller strike. And on the higher lofted wedges, it tilts about 10 degrees. And that's really based on more shots you play open. You want that angling across the face so that you're going square up the milling pattern rather than vertically up the face, which then when you open it up goes across the line, and then you're losing some of that grip. So it's really designed to optimize that spin profile, both from the groove itself, but then also the milling pattern on the face. Mizunos have always been actually quite efficient on spin, actually underrated in that respect. So one of the aspects of these heads that's worth looking at is on the shorter swings, how much spin do you actually get? So if I'm playing a sort of 45, 50 yard shot, now I'm playing it in a way that I'm trying to get a decent amount of spin. So that one there, hold on, 50.4 carry, 9,700 revs of spin. That is a lot of spin. So we're normally trying to get, say, on a 50 yard shot, you'd often say 7,500, 8,000 revs of spin would be great. 9.7 is actually a very, very high amount. So I've always been able to get a decent bit of spin, but actually on that partial shot, that's a very, very high level of spin. See if I can do that again. Maybe slightly longer. Sorry, 45, 46 yards carry, 9,400 revs of spin. So that goes to show where the groove pattern on these heads, and say Mizuno have always been underrated for spin on their wedges. That's a very strong spin number, and up until now the Callaway, the jaws have been exceptionally good on spin. These really rival those for the partial shots. One of the other aspects you get is that it's a slightly softened satin finish. The other finish is they kept the denim copper, which is that orangey finish. That was something that's very, very popular with the T22s, very distinctive. And they've got the denim copper, the satin, which is say a little bit of a softer satin. It's a little bit more chromed on the T22s. And then they've got the raw series, which rust up. So any of the raw ones, it helps if you're doing a bit of we often adapt the grinds very slightly for different players. You then don't see where it's been ground because you don't get that visual effect of taking the top plating off. But you also reduce any glare whatsoever. But wedge-wise, slightly different sole shapes to T22s, slightly different shaping of the head, but I think the updates to the face make them very, very strong from a spin point of view. So if you're looking for a spinny forged wedge head, that's a great option. So some really nice additions, some really good performance upgrades I think on these. Certainly a head I think we're going to do a lot of this coming year or so.